Well, thank you, Stephanie, for the nice introduction, and thank you, everybody, for being with us today. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to sharing this message today. So, sorry, Stephanie, I made you read such a long title. The main gist of it really is going to be looking at, so really you change your curriculum, now what? What's next? Where do we go from here, and how do we make the appropriate changes to our new curriculum moving forward to make sure that we're maximizing student outcomes, which is obviously always the primary goal in education, and specifically for, with my background in higher ed and medical education. So really we're going to go through just four main areas today. I'll kind of go over a brief introduction of identifying the needs for why to use this assessment data, how to use this assessment data to improve your curriculum, and then really look at just a really quick overview on how to categorize questions. And for those of you that are ExamSoft users already know how to do this, don't worry, I'll be brief with that part, and just to kind of give the new users a brief idea of how simple the task really is. And then we'll go through and just kind of look at the benefits, the educational benefits, and the ways that it's impacted the past schools and the curricula that I've worked with. And then I'll touch briefly on how we use it here, and the positive steps we've used with it, and also the areas where we found that we could have improved, and really learning from our mistakes as well throughout the process. So just to add to that, with my personal background at Oklahoma State University, we're at the medical school here, and we implemented a new curriculum 3 years ago now. So we went through that fun process of juggling 2 different curricula through a couple years there, and now we are fully on to our new curriculum, where all students are on to our new curriculum. And so we learned throughout this process many important ways to evaluate that curriculum moving forward. Also, as Stephanie mentioned, I previously worked at Kent State, where we were looking into a new curriculum there as well. So I kind of been able to work on both sides of this, in the preparation and the post-curriculum, and how, again, really focusing on student outcomes and identifying what we're doing positively and unfortunately negatively to affect those student outcomes. So really simple objectives for today. I'm just going to, hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to utilize categories to obtain the student assessment data, and with that, recognize how we can use our both formative and our summative assessments to identify the curricular strengths and weaknesses, and that's really the main point of this. And then most importantly, isn't just to identify what our strengths are, but to make the appropriate adjustments with our curriculum moving forward, again, to improve our student outcomes. So just a fairly brief introduction to really the overall presentation, and really to the thought process of this. So really, when you implement a new curriculum, and I know those of you that are preparing to go through this or have gone through it, or especially those of you that are in the middle of looking at a new curriculum now, it's a really big relief when you get to that new curriculum, and those of you that have done it understand that it feels great getting through all the hard work and the research and the countless hours spent on creating that new curriculum and tailoring it to your institution. But we all know that it's a new starting point, not just it's not a finish line. As big as a relief as it is, it's a whole new world that we're getting into, and there's a whole new set of issues that come up with that oftentimes are difficult to anticipate through just using exterior research or qualitative data if you doing self-studies and whatnot throughout the process. And regardless of the size or the amount of how big your curricular change is, it really puts your educators in this uncharted territory of their contact hours may have changed, the order and the sequence in which the content is being delivered has changed, the overall curriculum style may have changed. And oftentimes, we're seeing with educational research today that educators, especially in higher ed, are being pushed toward engaging students in more active learning which getting into active learning in addition to changing into a new curriculum is a lot of change at once, and it's very difficult, especially getting away from that almost safety blanket of lecturing to students. So there's a lot of uneasiness. There's a lot of uncharted territories that we kind of need to navigate through and figure out, what we're doing right for our students, and the things that we're doing right, how do we continue those things? So that's where the quantitative data gets in. I'll kind of touch on that a little bit on the next slide. But in order to pursue improving student outcomes, we really need to evaluate the new curriculum immediately. And I understand that it's a very tall task. We experienced that here firsthand, where you're just trying to keep your head above water at times because it is such a difficult transition. However, with all the change that is going on, it is paramount to really understand if what you're doing is working as anticipated. There's going to be a whole new set of repercussions for what our actions are with the new curriculum, and how do we adjust to those appropriately to do what's best for our students. And there's also the necessity to make those decisions quickly and any necessary tweaks as soon as possible, so you're not doing a disservice to your current students in the new curriculum. So as I had there at the bottom, and probably most importantly in this slide, it's key to learn what those small changes can be to improve the new curriculum and then implementing them. So as I mentioned before, and we fall into this category that, and when I say we, I'm speaking of my current institution and previous institutions. We're really good at collecting internal data from surveys and focus groups and self-studies with faculty and staff or the students, and that's done frequently throughout higher ed. And of course, a large part of the process is conducting external research. We do want to learn what other institutions have done, how they've implemented new curriculum, and obviously we find schools that are similar to ours and learn from those. However, it's incredibly important to take internal quantitative data to see if you really are reaching the outcomes that you'd like to reach. One example that struck us and myself personally was that I actually was on a webinar, I actually believe through ExamSoft, and we had a really terrific presenter speaking about ways that they prepare their students for boards. And it resonated with me quite a bit, and when their research was very incredibly helpful, when we went to apply that research to our own institution, we actually kind of found some of the opposite to be true of what the presenter gave us. Not meaning that that individual was incorrect, just what worked for their institution was slightly different for our institution. So, and with that being said, that really showed us the importance of taking our own quantitative data within our institution, because although we can find other like schools, it's very difficult, or near impossible to use someone else's data to apply it to your school, just because you have your own set of faculty, staff, students, curricula, etc. So in utilizing ExamSoft through, obviously, if we use those for our exams, we can get quite a bit of data out of that. And that data can actually also be taken retroactively. So in this situation, the retroactive data, if you haven't gone through it yet, can be taken from your previous curriculum and just kind of stored and used as some baseline data to compare your new curriculum to, as I mentioned in the next point there. The main message that you'll get out of this, and I'll talk in a little bit about how we categorize our questions here and how we use those to identify these areas. But it really lends insight into which teaching methods are most successful. Is the curricular model successful? Which topics are most difficult for students? It even can teach you about which topics integrate well with other topics or even topic sequencing. Which question types are most difficult for students? We found here we typically anticipate that your higher level questions in the medical school, often that your clinical application type of questions, will pose the most difficulty to students. But we were surprised with some of the stats a little bit there, showing that our students actually excelled in those areas. So just, it's nice to get, again, that quantitative data to give you a clear picture of what you're you're accomplishing. And again, this information will help you make the alterations needed for your new curriculum. So I'll go through this section really briefly. This is just kind of the logistics of categories for those of you that aren't familiar. In ExamSoft, there's 3 different areas. There's your questions area, your assessments area, and then your categories. So categories are basically just an area in which you tag questions to. You make category folders and you tag questions to those folders. So for example, there I have in the top note there by subject matter. Sometimes we'll even go through just the syllabus and take each lecture topic and the questions that come from that lecture topic, categorize them by that. Difficulty level, we just use Bloom's taxonomy here. The question author, the type of teaching method. At a previous institution, we learned, we did studies on which type of teaching method was most successful for a small set of our courses. And so we compared different types of active learning methods with lecture methods, again, to see how we should continue to teach this topic. And that was greatly helpful for us. And then again, this style of question for us as an institution, oftentimes that becomes whether it's a clinical or more of a just kind of like a basic science type question. But these items can be placed, exam items can be placed into an unlimited number of categories. On average, we probably place ours into about 6. I have a list on a later slide that we'll go through and show. But if you want to go beyond that, by all means, you definitely can. And the stats based on each category can be learned to give you the information that you need to evaluate your curriculum. So if you have a specific subject area that you're trying to emphasize in your new curriculum, are you getting that point across? Are students doing well in that specific content area? So you can categorize questions by that content area and then get specific feedback on that information. So it's looking at exam stats now can go well beyond just the class average on a given exam, but it can really nuance how they're doing on very specific areas. And this will be, if you identify areas that students struggling quite a bit, that's where you can tweak your curriculum to maybe add some more content in there to teach the content differently. The different ways of categorizing really can help you to identify where you're deficient and where you can make your tweaks to improve student outcomes. So with how to categorize the questions, it's incredibly easy. You can actually do it as the question's being created. If you're familiar with the question layout page, there's just a little column on the left-hand side of the page, and you can just click Add Category, and you add the category or add your question to, again, as many categories as you would like. Again, you can do this with questions that have already been created as well, and go through your old question folders and categorize those. Categories must be pre-made, so you'll make the categories ahead of time and then go into the questions and put them into the categories. And again, whether it's a new question or a previously used question, it's a very simple, just a few clicks, and you have your information categorized. One very useful thing that we use here at our institution quite a bit is there's an area for longitudinal analysis, so you can look at several exams, several years worth of exams. If you want to look at an old curriculum and you have several years worth of information, you can also look at specific several topics at once across several different courses as well. So it really does. You really can customize this however you want for your institution and in your categories. And finally, just as kind of a nice help, categories work as a folder structure as well. So if you were creating an exam and you wanted so many base knowledge level type questions on an exam, you could do that. Or if you wanted so many difficult, more difficult higher level questions on your exam, it really helps in setting the blueprint for your exam, which is just a nice little additional help in all this. So really the next few slides here are focusing on the benefits and why we do this. The first part here actually is kind of the little extra added benefits, and not necessarily what adds to your necessary curricular adjustments, but it just kind of the added benefits that come along with it. So you can actually categorize your new questions by your objectives and competencies of your new curriculum. This is very, very helpful to make sure you're assessing your students appropriately, that you're actually hitting all those competencies. Those of you that have gone through a curricular change or are going through one, I'm sure you understand the difficulties in making sure that all of the objectives that you need to hit from, that are dictated by our accrediting bodies, and all the objectives that you want to cover that are unique to your school or that were in your old curriculum that you covered and want to continue to cover. That can be a tall task in making sure that you've added all that information into your new curriculum. Again, through the question categorization, this makes it very helpful, and it also helps you to identify if the quantity of questions that you're using to assess, and I'll talk about that actually on the next slide. It actually provides insight on curricular integration and order. So this was something really helpful in the medical school, at least. But when you move to a new curriculum, oftentimes you're worried about the order in which the sequencing of information. Well, this helps provide information to us to make sure that we were giving students the appropriate information in the appropriate order, whether it's looking at different types of organ systems like we do in the medical school, or whatever it may be in your institution. And finally, one other little added bonus: it makes reporting on assessment content and how we assess students much easier. So if when it comes time to report to our accrediting bodies, you do have in a nice, neat folder structure how you assess your students, the depth at which you assess your students, which is really a great help and a time saver and really stress saver too, we found. So, again, moving forward with why do we categorize? What are the benefits of this? Well, you can look again at the different areas. So the quantity of exam items from each discipline or class meeting. We found here that we were emphasizing certain class or certain content areas or more through the amount of assessment items than we realized, and we weren't emphasizing certain areas as much as we would have liked through the amount of questions that we're asking on it. We all know, dealing with students, that they're always motivated by the points and their scores, and they maybe lose sight of the idea that they're here to learn and improve improve for their education and improve for their field. And so because of that, it really helped us be cognizant of what content are we emphasizing through the number of questions we're asking. That was a lesson that we learned moving from just by simply categorizing our questions. It also helps you see the students' preparedness for boards and licensure exams for your field. So it's a great analysis for that, to see if you're preparing students appropriately for those exams. Obviously, that's part of our charge as universities, is to make sure that we are appropriately preparing students for these higher level examinations. So that was great in nuancing the specific content and how they were doing as a student body in each area, to make sure that we were preparing them appropriately. Again, you can look at content, style of question, question difficulty. That all adds into those into that preparation process and learning what you're doing best for your students. As I mentioned before, as most curricular changes, disciplines do see altered contact hours. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. Especially if you're going to a really new type of curriculum. Here we went from a discipline-based curriculum to a systems-based curriculum, which is a big change, and it really altered contact hours. We were able to lessen the impact of that, of the contact hour change, though, through looking just simply at the quantity of assessment items that we're giving students. That it's, yes, we had to pare down some of our content and when necessary, but how we emphasize that content through our assessment items was a big help in still, again, preparing our students for their boards and then their careers moving forward. Probably the most important thing that I learned throughout this process is to be flexible. You know, it's very, very rare. If your institution has done this, I'm incredibly jealous, but it's very rare to hit a home run your first time up in curricular change. There's a lot of unknowns ahead, and it's really important to understand that and understand that you're going to have to be flexible, and you're going to have to be flexible on the fly, and be ready to not just tweak. Some of these things that you'll learn throughout the categorization is that lecture is better for your students, or specific types of active learning techniques, or group learning, or whatever it might be, is best for your students. And that's great if that's the only thing that you have to do is just kind of tweak your teaching or instructional methods. But unfortunately, it's more than likely that there's areas in your curriculum that you're going to have to tweak as well. And while the student feedback that we received at my last few institutions has been great, and especially in higher ed, students give nice, really thoughtful and insightful feedback. It's really important to look at the statistics as well, just because while there might be some learning methods or there might be some course styles that students don't particularly like, it may lead to positive student outcomes. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important, is making sure that we're preparing our students. And that's where that quantitative data comes into play. As I mentioned before, we're just 3 years into our new curriculum, and we've already made changes in each year of our curriculum. For the most part, small tweaks, but tweaks that we wouldn't have been able to identify if we didn't look through the statistical analysis of student performance on our assessments. I mentioned previously this can be used for formative and summative assessments. We really look mostly into our big exams, into our summative assessments. However, we will still categorize our formative assessments as well. With those, though, we look more within the class as an individual and not at a curricular level. If we are going to look at the curricular level, we do really take those summative exams to heart and evaluate those to the best of our ability. So this just kind of finishing up in these next couple slides here. I want to talk about how we use it now and what we've done that's been successful for us, and again, where we could have improved. So on the screen now is just a quick screenshot of some of our categories. So I mentioned before, and Stephanie mentioned in the intro, we're medical school. So as you can see, the content areas there are all science and medicine related. If you look toward the top here, we break our questions down by Bloom's taxonomy as well. We map our curriculum with our assessment items to see, again, what information we're covering, how students are doing specifically on this information, and what can we do to improve that. And then we also break it down. Again, this is more medically based example, but between basic science and our clinical questions as well, since those are two distinct areas within the medical curriculum. So really looking through our experiences, I guess my experiences is that we consistently tag questions in these following categories. We do look at our Bloom's taxonomy level. That is typically a joint venture between those of us that work in our medical education department and our faculty. And, I'll mention that specifically more on the last slide here coming up. We look at the overall subject matter. So if you, the previous slide here, these are big, biochemistry, histology, immunology. Those are really, broad categories. So we do look at it by the broad category. And we also will look at it as individual class meeting topic. Again, that's something as simple as going through the course schedule and looking at how at which topics are covered each week. Or we look at major course themes. So if there's a theme that runs through several class meetings, we'll categorize it by that as well. This is something that is an incredibly customizable system. So each of our classes categories does look different because they are. Well, we do have some topics that run in in different courses, and we certainly do categorize with that to be able to do some longitudinal analysis. We also have categorization within the specific courses as well, and again, that's the part that's highly customizable that can help us learn about what's going on specifically with that course, how it works within the curriculum. Does it work sequentially in the curriculum? Are there changes that need to be made to the instructional methods, et cetera, et cetera? It just depends on how you choose to categorize your questions. We also will look at the instructional method, again, whether that's team-based learning, case-based learning, lecture, et cetera. And we also will categorize it by instructor. That's more for housekeeping purposes. We don't specifically use it as an evaluative measure for our faculty. And then these results are then run for individual exams, and they're also run at the end of the semester for the whole course at the end of the year, looking back retroactively to several years back. We've experienced that quite a bit here, where we've separated out our old curriculum information, our new curriculum information, and made some comparisons to see maybe there were things in the old curriculum we were doing really, really well that we'd like to kind of, not necessarily change back to, but use some of those lessons that we used previously to incorporate those more into our new curriculum, so we're not reinventing the wheel. And again, really the most important point of all this, if you do have a specific areas that produce substandard outcomes, it really needs to be quickly identified. This is the method that is easiest for most institutions that use larger exams to use this to identify weaknesses in your curriculum, and then again remediate it to improve for not just future student groups, but if you can improve for the current students that are going through, obviously that's paramount as well. The last little note I have there on this page is is overall course and individual students, and I just made that note to speak toward that we can learn about our overall courses, we can learn about our overall curriculum. One, again, little added bonus in when you evaluate the curriculum. A couple slides ago I talked about how this can help prepare you for accreditation visits, or this can help you make sure you're covering all of your competencies and objectives. You also can take these category reports and convey them to students. And so the students can actually see how they're doing specifically on these categories. It's something that's a big help beyond just going and reviewing their exam, because they can actually see the themes and areas where they specifically struggle. So if you have 15 questions on a given topic and students only got 6 of those correct, they know this is an area I specifically need to look at. Whereas if they have another area where they got 9 out of questions correct, they know they're pretty strong there. They might not have to review that information going forward. That's helpful for their future, within that current course, for their future courses, and then as they prep for either their career, a board or licensure style exam. And again, that's all information we can give to the individual student that empowers them to self-identify their strengths and weaknesses and respond accordingly. And so finally, moving forward, just through our experiences, things that I often get asked questions about what needs to be done, do you need to be staffed for this? This, in my experience, takes an educational staff and a faculty staff to complete. We understand that our faculty is incredibly busy, and they have quite a bit on their plate as is. So our medical education staff here is what operates our categories, pulls the statistics, and presents those statistics to the faculty members. Of course, in any institution, especially if you have a large institution with numerous faculty members, there's different level of users that are different or have different level of comfort with technology. So we do have some faculty members that will go in and do this themselves as well. We most certainly welcome that. If it's their content, their questions, by all means, we encourage them, if they're comfortable, to go through and categorize them themselves. However, much of this, and especially breaking down the information and especially when looking at the teaching methods and the curricular models, in my experience, our institutions have leaned quite a bit on the educational staff. With pulling this quantitative data, it's always important to remember that each institution, we do have our own unique strengths and weaknesses, and we need to use our own internal data to identify those. Again, we can't always rely on other institutions' research and data. And there's been reports that I've read or presentations that I've viewed, and I've thought for sure that there's no way that we would differ from them, and we have, just because our institution is unique from others as well. Finally, if you do have licensure or board exams or some type of standardized exams that students need to pass, it's great to compare the different areas of those components that are going to be on those exams with your curriculum to make sure you're preparing students for that appropriately. And then, obviously, the point that I've made a few too many times, proactively improve your curriculum model instruction. So take all that information. While it will be tedious at times to go through and categorize each question by 6 or 7 different categories and pull that data, it is incredibly useful data that gives insight into your curriculum, your faculty, your students, and you can really make well-informed decisions on how to improve all of the above to improve your student outcomes. With that, I say thank you for your time. I really appreciate everyone being with us today. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd love to hear them now and do my best to answer them. And if you want to touch base with me outside of the presentation, feel free to contact me at my email address on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. We really appreciate your presentation today. As Dan stated, we're going to go ahead and open up the forum for a Q&A session. So if you do have questions that you'd like to pose to him or to ExamSoft, now would be the time to do that. All you need to do is type the question in the little questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We already have a few in the queue already, Dan, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in.
Great.
The first question is, can I add a category retroactively to a question to get the information or data back?
That's a great question. Absolutely. You can make, I can make categories right now for questions that we gave 6 years ago, and then categorize those questions by that new category I just created, and then run the statistics on it. It's a quick and easy process, and truly it's no different than whether you categorize it retroactively or if you do it in the moment.
Great, thank you. Next question is, would you suggest implementing a process of this nature before or during a curriculum shift?
That is a great question. That's one that I've actually learned the hard way at a previous institution, and that's most certainly if you have the time and the means to do this ahead of time. It's incredibly helpful to learn what you do well in your current curriculum to make sure you mimic that into the new curriculum you're going into. And then when you do get to your new curriculum, you have that nice baseline data from your old curriculum. So you can look back and compare your new stats to your old to make sure that you're exceeding where you came from. Obviously, if we make a curricular change, we want to make improvements, and that's the reason to do it. So that it really helps, and it saves a lot of time, because after jumping into the new curriculum, your time becomes so valuable. Focusing and making sure everything works appropriately. That would just be a huge help to have that baseline data set up in advance.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how often are you aggregating the student or course data for curricular decisions or interpretation?
Truly constantly. After each exam, which in your institution's exams come pretty frequently, we do look at that exam data. Do we make curricular shifts after each exam? Absolutely not. We want to make sure we have enough data to make a well-informed decision. But at the end of each semester, after every semester, we do review our courses and looking at exam data, and it's most certainly part of that. And so, as you know, in education, it's really set up to make those changes during the summer when you do have some downtime. So if we are going to make changes, that is, as long as it's something we don't recognize that needs to be done immediately, that's the time that we do it, is during the summer. But we are always constantly cognizant of our students' performance and how our curriculum and how our instructional methods are affecting that performance.
Great. Next question is, I'm going to rephrase this a little bit, but I think I'm going to have the same gist. Do you use ExamSoft for any performance-based or mastery-based assessment? And if so, are you using that data as well for any curriculum changes or revisions?
Well, performance-based, we do, I mean, outside of our classic, typical classroom performance, we do use ExamSoft with our clinics, and in our clinical rotation, students will take ExamSoft examinations at the end. And so we do look for, obviously, mastery level when they get to that stage. And again, we do categorize those questions. That's a little bit of a longer process because they're smaller exams. There's not as many assessment items for us to go through. So the majority of what we do look at is our didactic courses, which take place in our first 2 years in the medical school.
Great. Okay, that's all we have today, Dan. Really appreciate your presentation and your time, sharing your experience with us this afternoon. Thank you. To everybody who attended, we really appreciate you taking time out of your, what I know is a very busy day and schedule, to be with us and to listen to the presentation. Again, this webinar has been recorded, so you will receive an email in the next 24 to 48 hours that will have a link to the recording. Please view and share that as you would like. Also, when you close out of the webinar, you will get a quick little pop-up